Go. So we've talked before, and we've talked primarily about kind of what I'm doing, which is trying to become a consultant, kind of like you. And one thing that really, like, I really took away from our conversation was that you've built Pyro prompts with the idea that if you have a project that is kind of like an indie hacker project or a SaaS project, even though it might not be profitable, even though in and of itself you might say, "Oh, this wasn't worth the time," and the pyro prompts might be. Well, we're gonna get into that later. But even if it isn't, it's a great marketing tool because now you have a real thing that maybe a few people actually pay for that you can show to your clients. That maybe your clients find you through that real thing, and that's really powerful. And I want to ask you, how many clients have you found? Not necessarily through power prompts, but also like either you found them through power prompts or them knowing about power prompts kind of helped pitch them.
Yeah, sure. Um, so I've got three people who I do things for outside of Pyro prompts that kind of found me through Pyro prompts.
Okay.
And that is, so I think one of the real challenges with consulting is if you are consulting for a business, you can't, you frequently have an NDA. It's really hard to share what you've done for that business with
Okay.
other prospective clients, right? And it's the same thing if you have like a regular full time job. It's really tough to share what it is that you're doing at that job. So share screenshots, log in, do that stuff for on a consulting side, right? And so having your own products allows you to at least demonstrate your capabilities and what you're able to do that would be difficult to demonstrate otherwise, right? And so in consulting, sometimes I'll be able to reference to what I've done in PyroPrompts as an example of what I've done, and then I don't feel like I need to go and reference something that I've done at for a client, which I feel like is against what the client would want to do, right? I can reference like marketing site, but to log in and demo something
Yeah.
within the product is really tough, especially after you've left the job, right? If you're not consulting anymore for something, like you probably don't have that login anymore. If you're not working for a company,
Yeah.
you don't have that login anymore. So like it kind of like it's almost like you abandon that reference to what you've done. And so being able to reference those things can be really helpful. And so just like when we spoke about your business, sometimes I'll talk with people who are looking to automate things, and I can reference, well, here's what we're able to do in Pyro prompts. Is this something that you're looking for? And if we're able to solve it in Pyro prompts, this might be a great product for you. But if you're looking for something more advanced, more custom,
Your
then maybe
customer.
you're looking for a direct consulting relationship, and then that would be kind of the next level of a relationship beyond just using my product. Like, how can I help you develop
Yeah.
what it is that you specifically need? And so it's a good jumping off point for those conversations at the very least.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think you brought a good point because, for example, I've coded a lot of stuff for my previous. I guess you can call them clients, even though I was a contractor and kind of acted full time as a kind of a job. But I
Sure.
have projects that are public, but the Git is not public. The Git history is not there. You can't see my commits. You can't see whether my code is actually worth anything or if I just pushed slop and it just kind of happened to work.
Yep.
And this was a discussion. Like I recently interviewed with this job where they really liked me. They liked what I was talking, the architectural stuff I was saying. But the question was, okay, show us a project of yours. And I was like, well, I have a few like public ones, but I'm not exactly proud of them because I didn't really care about them. Well, like, and they were like, okay, fine, do a take home, and we'll trust that you did your best work on a take home. And I had to do the take home because otherwise,
Yep.
in all honesty, they couldn't take me seriously.
Yep. Well, and I've done take homes before. It's been years since I've done one, but the take homes can actually, I think, be a good indication for me. Is this a company I'd want to work for? What kind of work are they even bringing to me? Like, if so, sometimes the take home is like an actual bit of work that they need done, and I would obviously prefer to just like do a, hey, like, let's just do a short term relationship project base for what it is that you
Yeah.
need done. If it seems like that, sometimes some companies do a really good job of framing it as a test, like where they have actually solved something recently and they have like dumbed down what it is they've solved. They've narrowed in and said, like, we need you to create this interface. We already have this interface, but we need you to create it, or we are working on infrastructure as code and a pipeline for that.
Yeah.
We already have this. They want to compare how I would do it to how they've done it. And so that when they do that, I do find that to be beneficial, because then I can see what it is that they're evaluating
Yeah.
and say, like, is this something I'd want to work for? Right. Like, so if I go in and they've made promises about, like, oh, you're not going to have to, we do all JavaScript, we do all Python, but then they give me like a Rust
Yeah.
project, or like a Ruby on Rails project, something that I'm like, oh, this isn't exactly kind of what you promised the job would be. Kind of gives an indication that maybe there have like there's a misalignment there, right?
Yeah, that never happened to me. But I like take homes. I even once I had to hire somebody, and I did. I just gave them I did a personality interview. I was like, okay, you sound cool. Here's a take home, small one, doing like 3 4 hours, and I think it's a great way to test it because I've tweeted this a few days ago. But lead code style problems, I don't think they're good anymore for testing people. I've done something like a few dozen hard problems in lead code recently, and I've done them entirely with ChatGPT, not even the O1 model, the newest one. I've done like a normal 4.0 model, and I
Yeah,
didn't do any sort of input from myself whatsoever. I just copy pasted the problem, give it the problem, give me a solution, pasted it in. Usually it worked the first time. If it didn't work, I give it the error. If it did work, I would usually just yell at it and say, make it faster, make it use less memory. And I would end up in like the top 20 30% of the lead code solvers for that problem. And
sure.
this is why I'm going to actually make a video about this too. But this is why I don't think lead code style problems really test anything anymore.
Yeah, I've never done any leak code.
Okay.
I don't think leak code runs in production, so I kind of really
True.
don't care about it.
Agreed 100%. I'm glad you see the same way. And this is why I think the homes do really well. And this is why I also agree with your take, which I didn't realize it would be so useful for me to build a project. And now I'm working on something that is similar actually to Pyro Prompts. I called it DevForge.
Competition, some healthy
Not,
competition's good,
not
man.
quite, not quite, not quite. I say it's similar because Pyro Prompts, the way I've kind of played with it a bit and understand it, is it's aimed at content makers, and it is a framework which basically helps people do the prompt engineering they don't understand, or do different multi-prompt setups which they wouldn't know how to do. Is that correct?
It definitely helps with prompt chaining. So if you try to ask a prompt to do too many things, it usually does a worse job at it.
Yeah,
Versus if you have a prompt do one thing and give it just the context it needs to do that one thing, it usually does a better job. And so by allowing it to do one thing and then do the next thing, especially with different models. So, for example, I can use Perplexity. We hook up to Perplexity's API
yeah,
now. We can ask questions of like what's going on, like in the news, what's going on the internet, right? So I can do a search, brings back that information, has the citations. The next prompt can then decide to extract a good story, right? I can use like Chat GPT model for that. Extract a good story, write a good story, and then I can have the next prompt repurpose that story into blog post, newsletter, X post, LinkedIn, and then I could have that, just save it right there. We're starting to test with like automated posting to X or LinkedIn.
nice.
That's very beta right now, but that is hopefully, yeah, it definitely helps content creators go through that process where, like, maybe right now you're just going into Chat GPT and you're pasting some things in and running some
Yeah,
prompts and filling in prompts. um, I don't know about you, I didn't sign up to be a data entry intern, and
no,
so but sometimes if you're doing a lot of stuff with Chat GPT, you're copying and
yeah,
pasting, you're spending a ton of time
yeah.
copying and pasting, and so I think there's better ways to do it.
I think so too, and I think it's especially like because it's also, aside from the manual and boring aspect of doing the data entry stuff, it's also that when you don't use a system like a framework or something like Pyro Prompts or whatever, because I know there are other solutions out there too, when you don't have a consistent way of using the same kind of prompt set up as you've used for your content, what ends up happening is you have inconsistent results.
Yes.
Like you have this prompt where you did end shot and you did the role assignment, and then this other one where you only did role assignment and you didn't do end shot, and now the outputs are inconsistent, and you're trying to make relatively consistent and good content. What's going to end up happening is you're just not going to have to do that. You're not going to be able to do that, or you're going to have to do even more copy pasting.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. You copy paste. You go. You're digging through your old conversations. You find that one because the search isn't that good for conversations. You
Oh
finally
yeah,
find it, and then you go and you copy the prompt. But maybe you've had a conversation with it where it's like, no, actually change the tone to this.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so you
yeah.
spend a lot of time. Like if you spend the upfront time making a good prompt or a good system,
You have to
then
save
you
it.
can reuse it over and over and over
Yeah,
instead of having to wing it all the time, right? And there are these great prompt frameworks out there that you can follow. There are like if you're going to spend the time to get good outputs one time, you might as well spend the extra couple minutes to turn it into
true.
a template so you can keep reusing that. And that's kind of one of the things I like about Pyro prompts is I can save the prompt in there. I can use it as a template on its own. Hop into ChatGPT, just use it right away as a template. Or if I feel like this is something that I want to do chained ones or run it on a schedule, I can just automate around that prompt. And then I can
Yeah,
reuse that prompt between different workflows. And so it's not like I have that prompt saved in one place and I got to copy it. And if I want to make changes to it, I can do that. Like recently, I saw some things that were saying that now AI, how everybody was complaining that the word delve
oh
was like a
yeah.
very AI specific one. I saw somebody posting that amid or amidst seems to be the new AI term, and so now if I want to make sure that that is removed from the output, I only need one prompt to change that in, and it
Yeah.
will trickle down to all of my different automation workflows, which is really handy.
And that's really like people might say Pyro Prompt is just a GPT wrapper. Cursor is a GPT wrapper, and
I
we
love
use
GPT
it and
wrappers,
we
man.
pay for it and we love it. Like I love Cursor, I love Windsurf. I think they're great tools and they are GPT wrappers. So what's with that? Like there's real value in it because one, the fact that this is a very manual process if you wouldn't wrap it. And then the second thing which I've seen now that I'm super active on Reddit this past month, most people actually have no idea how to use these things. Most people don't know about prompt engineering. Most people don't know about any of this stuff of how to use like AI effectively. And you can try to educate them, but I think it's easier and more valuable to them to just kind of give them a turnkey solution.
Yeah. So there are some great classes. Google recently put out one.
Okay.
There was like a DeepMind AI one that was put out a while back that covered a bunch of great topics. And going through one of those classes, or going through a workshop, or having like somebody kind of walk you through their methodology of doing these things can be really productive, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of spending you know 10 hours, 100 hours messing around with ChatGPT, if you have somebody come in and help you out writing some prompts and get you started, I think you can get a lot of bang for your buck out of that, right? um,
Definitely so. And
but
also my other thinking is if you use a prompt framework, like, and this is one question which and one of the topics which I really want to dive in deep with you and with a few other smart AI people. Evals, right? If I'm gonna be a normal user chatting with ChatGPT, I haven't actually tested the prompts thoroughly with a bunch of different inputs to see if they actually are consistently good. It might be that they were just good this one time for me. And so, do you guys at Pyroprompts do evals? And how do evals even really work? Because I don't fully like my understanding is that it's a mixture of normal programming unit tests and a mixture of LLM as a judge, which sounds like fancy words for I let this other black box tell me that this black box did a good job. But what do you think of
yeah,
that? And how do you guys use that?
yeah. So we haven't gotten too deep into evals. Like people bring their own prompts generally, and so
Okay.
but for evals, when I have done evals, it is a lot of like you go through the manual steps to be like, I'm going to run this a couple times. Does it work, right?
Yeah.
Once you're kind of happy with that process, then I really do like the LLM as a judge methodology,
Oh,
because
nice.
what you can do is if you remove um, the prompt, the question from the user to what was generated, and you base the evaluation off of its own prompt, you kind of have these isolations. And so For example, if I have like a hard coded prompt, I like to do snapshot tests a lot, where
Yeah.
you save what it is, and so you can snapshot the whole RAG process, right? Where it's going and fetching data, making sure that it fetches the data the same every time. That's deterministic, or should be, unless you're
Okay.
reaching out to an external service. But in tests, I would mock that out. So you have like the prompt generation part. You snapshot that and you say, okay, well, if for some reason this prompt that I've generated changes, I want my tests to inform me of that or fail, right? And then I can update that snapshot very easily, right? Python PyTest has like a great framework for that. A lot of testing frameworks have great like snapshotting methods. You can even like roll your own.
Yeah.
So you save that to a file, you commit that. So the prompt generation side, then you run it through an LLM. It generally in unit tests, like I don't want it to actually run against the LLM because that's going to cost me money, especially if I'm running a lot. And
Yeah.
so I will also snapshot that process where it's going to make the question off to the LLM. And let's just say the input's the same, the prompt, the model, it's all the same going to the LLM. Let's just assume for my own cases that it's going to return the exact same thing every time, which is
Okay.
unrealistic, right? So that's like how I would run my
Yeah.
own unit test to make sure everything's flowing through. So we get the output that's like expected. Um, and then I can use that in later steps. Like in especially if I'm doing the structured outputs. Structured outputs are great because then you can really like narrow in on the different fields that something
Yeah.
has, and that I've been using those more and more, and those are easier to do evals on. Right, if you're doing like a long blog post, that's a little bit more difficult. But if I'm doing like an extraction of extract a word that would be the category, like a very simple structured output of like let's say three, where it's like category, extract the date, extract the author from something, right? That should be pretty deterministic most of the time,
Yeah.
and so then you can do an eval on that pretty easily. When you're doing something that's longer, like a summarization or repurposing content, then yeah, you end up with LLM as a judge, which I think you can have it judge with structured outputs where it's like give me a 1 through 10 on how good this is, right?
Okay. That's what I was
um,
thinking too.
and so then you make sure that it's within that acceptable range. But yeah, LLM as a judge can be challenging, and it definitely impacts the consistency that you have.
When I was into Web3 security, so over a year ago, I created this analogy of when you're building smart contracts and like protocols, you have a series of security nets. So you might catch the bug in the design doc stage, or you might catch the bug in the unit tests, or you might catch the
Mhm.
bug in the PR review, in the audit, or eventually, hopefully, it doesn't get hacked and you get caught in the bug bounty. Um, that's kind of the series of nets, and it's kind of the same thing here. You're trying to catch it with the cheapest ways of testing it, and then if all else fails, I guess you can introduce user feedback, an easy way for users to give you feedback on their prompt. That's probably the place where you don't really want to get to, but sometimes you might.
Yeah, I have found that the structured outputs help out a lot.
Okay.
um, and with pyro prompts, people do bring their own prompts for what is actually like running, like the text in text out, which aren't structured. Um, and so I kind of leave the evals up to people, but I have considered like adding a more robust eval framework. But you can do some of that stuff with pyro prompts where you have snippets for different inputs, and you're just gonna run in an automated way. Pyro prompts probably isn't the best way to do it. Like if you're really into the prompt evals, I think there's better tools out there. And like I think LM Studio has some good frameworks around that. Um,
LM
but
Studio. Never heard of
I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time on evals specifically, besides for what just helps me out to create my own products.
it. Fair enough. Fair
Some of the
enough.
evals that you see though, like I don't feel like they're very like they're not like real cases where people are like, oh, like compare 9.9 to 9.11, which one's bigger? And like you shouldn't be using an LLM for
Yeah, that's
arithmetic.
not. That's not what you should. Yeah, definitely. I read this article, and you've kind of alluded to this in a tweet yesterday as well when we were talking about fine tuning. I read
Uh,
this article where it's like, don't use ML if you can, you know, prevent yourself from using it. Find the easiest non ML solution first, and then kind of evolve through it. And I've also made an article on the topic, but like, yeah, there's a lot of material on the topic where it's basically like, just do the easiest thing first. Why not just use like a JavaScript or a Python operator where you compare the numbers?
Absolutely. And that's something that so I spent a ton of time doing more traditional AI, which is either categorization models, using like GPM or um, some of the other ones. And so you got categorization, you got like regression models, clustering models. Like there's a lot of other models out there, and 100% that's the ethos of where you start. You start with an if condition, right? And you can make that like in your code kind of just like a black box where it's like, okay, we have an interface of input and
Yeah.
categorization on the other side, and the interface for this one is it's going to be the most basic one that doesn't use advanced AI, right? It's going to be very cheap. It's going to use an if condition. It's going to look for these specific words, right? Is this about finance, right? So it's going to look for words like interest rate. It's going to look for Federal Reserve. It's going to look for stocks, indices, right? Look for these basic words, right? And that at the very least can get me rolling before I need to integrate any AI. Once you're happy with how everything else is hooked up, now you can start making the decision of, okay, well, how do I improve upon this model? So you make another implementation of that class that is going to, instead of just looking for words, it's going to do something more advanced. Maybe it's going to run it locally, maybe it's going to run it remotely and use AI to do that. But like as a software architecture, you want to simplify first
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then improve the quality of what you're able to offer because people might not even care about what it is that you built, right? Like you
True.
could put this all together and spend the time hooking up to AI, which is actually like really easy to do these days, though.
Yeah,
But
these
you
days.
can, yeah, these days it's really easy. But before, when you have to hook in like a machine learning model, yeah, you have to train the model, you have to do the evals on it, and compare a lot of stuff. Now you can use these LLM foundational models, and it's just they make it really easy.
They
But I
really
still
commoditize
recommend black boxing it, hiding it, doing something very simple first,
there.
proving it out, and then once you're happy with that, then like you can always revisit it or like parallelize work if you're working with somebody else, or you say, okay, you're going to hook everything up here. I'm going to work on the prompt that goes on behind the scenes to improve the quality here, and then you do some manual evals, you do some automated evals, and wait till you get
I
happy
think
with it.
that's fair. I think that's fair. You said you used to work in trad AI. How does that look like?
Sure. I didn't work specifically in traditional AI, just overall software engineering. Worked in advertising technology for 15 years mostly. And there were a lot of different things that we would do. You'd have models around determining if we did some things around real time bidding where you would
Okay.
see a request from an advertising exchange. So somebody has landed on a website. That website now makes the request to Google, says, hey, give me an advertisement to put here. Google makes the request to all these different ad exchanges or these demand side platforms looking for a brand that wants to advertise in the creative. They all make a bid and say, okay, here's how much I want to spend. Google then chooses the one that has the biggest bid and then places the advertisement on the website. We were one of those demand side platforms that would make that bid. And so we would determine how much we wanted to bid based on how likely we thought this person is going to convert. And so you'd
Oh,
see who that person is. It'd be like anonymized. You'd have like a cookie. You would then determine other things that you know about this person, what other websites they've been to, and then you would then run that through your model to say, okay, well, how likely is this person to convert? What's the best thing for them to convert on? And then you'd be able to then respond with here's the bid. That'd be like a regression algorithm. So there's a lot of training that goes on in the background for those things, a lot of data collection, and then training on that
and
to
that
make those
has to
determinations.
happen. That has to be really low latency. That has to happen really, really fast.
It
How do
has
you
we had to
solve?
respond in less than 100 milliseconds.
How do you solve that? I mean,
A lot of
I'm coming. Let me give you a bit of context of
sure.
how I'm asking that, because I'm coming from a context of having not worked with any sort of AI outside of LLMs,
Okay.
and LLMs are not fast. They're nice, they're powerful, they're cool, but they're sub 100 millisecond response. Not gonna happen. I haven't seen it.
You got to use Grok, Groq. They have the fastest LLM inference. They use Llama as their
Okay.
main models, but they do have some other models. Grok is, although actually somebody posted, Ashutosh posted another service. I'm blanking on it right now that I guess is faster than Grok, but Grok is super fast,
Okay.
very fast responses. It's great. I highly recommend it if you need that fast inference. And especially if you're not doing a summarization, right? If you're doing like a yes no on something, or you're looking for a response on like a, give me a 1 through 10 on how likely this person is to convert given this input, it's going to respond with that really quickly because it only has a couple characters to respond with. And so
Okay.
like the number of tokens that it takes to respond with is like how long the full response is. And so if you don't ask it for a lot, it can respond really quickly.
Okay. Fair. I'll give it a try. But how did you guys achieve that for ad tech?
Yeah, so it was I mean that was a massive challenge. Do that is hundreds and hundreds of machines, sharding, running things in memory locally on the instance. There was a lot of things that we would do like that, I did that at a couple different companies where like you would run Redis locally on the machine. You wouldn't run like a remote Redis instance that they would reach out to
Oh
because
yeah,
the network latency would get you right, and so
we've done
you would
that.
eat some of the um, it'd be tough to keep all the different Redis instances synced up on different machines. But you would just say that's not something that we're concerned about. We're okay with it being sometimes not perfect if they're not synced up. So instead of reaching out to the database to get the list of creatives every time, you would just only have that synced up every 15 minutes, for example. And then it would be able to just do really quick access right on the machine, which would significantly reduce latency. And so there were a lot of things like that. Running the models locally on the machine or running like a part of the model. So if you're able to do sharding, where you're saying, okay, this set of websites is going to all go to this machine, this exchange and this set of websites is going to go to this machine, then that machine only needs to know about those websites and that part of the model. So you can do like model sharding, you can do data sharding to really reduce what's on there. But also like some of these were pretty big beefy machines, so they could respond quickly, and and they had to respond quickly. So yeah, I mean, you have to go through optimization of every part from the load balancer to how it chooses which machine to go to how that machine optimizes, and you just look for bottlenecks. Um, you see a lot of these people. Somebody's been posting like benchmarks for different languages,
I know.
and
I've seen that too.
frequently benchmarks don't matter that much because that's not your bottleneck. But if you've eliminated all the other bottlenecks, like your latency database bottlenecks, then language might be your bottleneck. Like we were using Java at the time. If
Oh,
you
it's almost
and
not
and that can be
bad.
really good. I've used Node.js to get really fast response times, high latency, or low latency. And but now, if I was going to start, I'd probably start with JavaScript because that's what I'm most familiar with. But I'd probably want to give Go a try too.
Oh, you
I hear a lot of
should.
good
You
things
should. You should definitely. So we've also done Go for Prism. It's a project that I've worked on the past 2 years, and it's a data analytics platform. And core of the problem was also, okay, how do we make this fast? Because it's a lot of data, whatever. And we've also done Redis on a local machine in the same box because it was great. Um, we've also, like, even if you can try to put things, definitely put them in the same, at least, data center whenever you can.
that. Yes,
That helps as well. A big
SQLite is
problem.
great.
SQLite can be great too.
SQLite is phenomenal, right?
Yeah,
Even for large databases, if you set up the indexes right, if you're able to have the whole thing locally, you don't need it synced between
yeah,
machines
yeah, yeah.
instantly. That can be great.
I have an article on the topic where I compare latency if you have SQLite on the same box, Postgres on the same box, Postgres in the same data center, and Postgres in another, but same availability zone, but different data center. And For most applications, I would say same data center, you're probably going to be fine. But if latency is a huge thing, even Postgres same box, it's not going to beat SQLite. SQLite is the fastest, and it's because it's in process. But I forgot what I was trying to get at with this. But oh yeah, that about Go. I'm a huge fan of Go. I think Go is a beautiful language. If you know JavaScript, you can pick it up really fast because it's made with simplicity in mind. The cool thing about Go is it's kind of unlike Rust, where it takes work to make it performant. Go is kind of performant by default, even though it might not reach the same performance as Rust at its maximum, but it's
Sure.
pretty good. And then you have concurrency, which is really powerful, and it's simple and easy to kind of work with, which means you can have more junior developers contribute, but also it means it's very maintainable long term. I think you should definitely give it a try.
Yeah, no, I've only done like the most basic API setup with Go to just get a taste for it. But yeah, I look forward to someday writing an actual project with Go that makes it to production.
You should.
But I always I struggle with this with going back and forth of like, do I want to try a new framework, a new language because I like doing that, versus should I stick with what I know because I can create something that's valuable more quickly? And I tend to end up creating something with a framework that I know because I can create it quickly and start delivering value quickly. I do think that AI kind of changes that situation a little bit, where
It does.
now you can get going really quickly. I've used AWS for like 12 years, and a project that I recently worked on is all in Google Compute Platform. And initially, I was a little, daunted, obviously, hopping into a new cloud. And it's very easy to ask all the questions against AI. Say, well, here's how I would do this in AWS. How would you do this in GCP? Here's the tools I would use. Here's like what's the relevant? How do you switch that over? And it's really impressive what it's able to do. Where you're able to bootstrap knowledge really quickly.
It's true. It's true. It's getting more and more powerful, especially if you know how to ask for what you want. I've told you earlier about DevForge, which is kind of pyroprompt, but it's more about code. So screenshot to code, sketch to code, help with database design, that sort of stuff. And I've coded it in 3, 4 days without actually coding not one line of code.
Wow.
And I'm not saying it's the most beautiful thing, but it's decent. The code quality isn't bad. Of course, it required a lot of me talking to it and kind of guiding it, and it did
Yep.
require a more modularized code base. But 4 days without touching a line of code, I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, that is insane.
I
I
was
still have my hands in the code, um,
You
but
should try
I
it.
totally see how it's possible because, like, you end up using Tailwind classes, and you're like, okay, this doesn't look right. Like, I know how to fix this pretty quickly, or I know that this loop is doing the wrong thing. I can fix this pretty quickly by hand. Versus, I'm just going to ask the IDE to make the change. Like, I can change it pretty quickly. Also,
Yeah, that's true.
combining like GitHub's Copilot with either Cursor or I use NeoVim and Avante right now a lot, and that's really productive for me as well. I can hop between two different assistants, which is great.
I want to ask you because we're 33 minutes in. Do you have 5, 10 more minutes, or are you good?
I'm good to go. Yeah, I'm good to
Yeah.
go to the another 25 if you want.
Okay. Okay. So I think you should definitely give agentic no writing, no lines of code a try for like a few days. I'm not saying you would do it long term for everything. I will still touch lines of code,
Sure.
but it feels interesting. It's weird. I think it's something that we should all experience as devs. I think if these things get even better and if the frameworks around them get even better, coding is going to get interesting over the next 10 years.
So here's what I want to do. What I want is instead of having to type into the cursor chat or whatever, I want to dictate to it.
You can.
And Oh, in Cursor, you can dictate to it now.
You just download beterdictation.com, which is like an extension for MacBook, and then you click on
Oh,
it's not integrated in the same tool,
sure,
but you could do it. You could do it.
sure, yeah. That I'll have to give that a try because I'd like to be able to just speak to it and have it make those things happen. Because one of my favorite things actually to do with AI is like I'll go for a walk, I'll throw the earbud in,
Yeah,
and I'll just talk, right? Maybe I put my kids in a stroller and just ramble into myself about
yeah,
different things, ideas. Go for a good hour long walk and just talk, and then can take that whole audio file afterwards. Like I just recorded on my phone, not like recording anything specific. Take that audio file. And right now, I've got like audio transcribing in beta on Pyroprompts, where so I'll upload that to Pyroprompts. It'll get the whole transcription of it. It'll get the whole log of what I talked about. And then I'll run that through AI to like, okay, extract the ideas that I have, extract the action items, extract concerns. Like, what am I talking about, right? And then that can be really productive because then I can like split that up into actually different tasks and go and issue those things out.
yeah, yeah,
What I'd like to do is I'd like to just fully describe an app via a text note and then like send it to an agent to have it create the whole app for me, right?
yeah.
I don't think that. So I played with Cursor in the early days, and I found that it was nice, but it wasn't what I wanted,
It
and so
wasn't.
I ended up. Yeah, it wasn't as in depth as I wanted, and I didn't want to continue paying for it for what I was
Fair
getting.
enough. I
I
think you
think that
should
it's
give.
come a long way, and it's a lot better now.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. It's
Yes.
come a long way. It's more agentic nowadays, which
Yeah.
it's such a buzzword that I hate. Because what does agentic really means? Maybe you know more about AI, so you might correct me. But from my understanding, agentic is just, hey, I had this AI do something, and then I had another prompt to do this other thing on top of that, and I just kind of did this workflow. That, or maybe I also had it call some functions in between to an API or whatever. That's just a
So here's
workflow.
how I would describe agentic. Um, so there are workflows that are like these are the concrete steps that you take. That's not what I consider to be agentic. For agentic, I think it goes up a level where it is determining the plan of action, it's determining the steps that it needs to take, and then it's actually executing each of those steps. And some of those steps are non-deterministic, meaning it might need to run things multiple times, like a state machine, right? So
Okay.
first thing that your agent's going to do if you send it some code, it's going to create the whole list of steps that it needs to do. That might include doing some RAG to bring in additional information of like which files do I need to edit. Then it's going to actually edit those files, and then every time it edits them, it might want to then do an evaluation again on that file for if it's correct, and then continue to make changes. And so it can have those loops and like do this, like make changes while it's not good enough. And then eventually it will be happy with that. And then it can go on to the next step. And so it's not just like run this set of steps in order. It's some of these steps might include multiple things it doesn't know yet. And then it comes back before it goes
Okay.
to the next step. And so, for example, I've been working on an agent for advertising because I've got a ton of history in advertising technology that aims to help businesses improve their advertising in an automated way. And so the agent will be like, first of all, it will automatically look up like here's the keywords that you're doing, here's the ones that aren't working, here's the ones that are working, and like look to optimize those things for you. But it does that in like using AI, using an agentic flow, where it will make queries against the APIs or against the database. It
Yeah.
will run the analysis, and then it will make decisions about what to turn on, what to turn off, and it does that. It needs to make decisions every step of the way. It's not something that it's here's a rote set of steps to follow. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of things like that where it doesn't know what it needs to do yet. It needs to learn what it needs to do and then take action based on those learnings.
I
And
think
there's
you
some
should
great frameworks for it too. LangChain's got some great agent frameworks. I guess Pydantic AI just put out an agent framework that I want to check out. LangChain also has LangGraph, which I've played with and is really handy and I want to get more into. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool agent frameworks out there, and I don't think one of them will dominate. I think there'll be many of them competing. It'll be new frameworks coming out. This could be the whole beginning of the new agentic web, where you have agents talking to agents, getting stuff done, working together. And maybe they'll end up transacting in crypto. We'll see.
I hope so. Maybe. I don't know if I'm. I don't know if I hope so. I'm not sure what I hope about that. I'm not sure what I think about that. I'm not gonna give an opinion on that. But I do want to take your opinion on UIs. I mean, imagine an agentic web where I just open my watch and I tell it, "Hey, I want to order a mattress," and when it goes on the web, it doesn't need to have an actual pretty UI. It just needs an API response, right? How do
Yeah,
you think UIs will evolve? Will we really even have UI designers and front end engineers over the next really long time? All
yeah,
I'm saying is 10, 20, 30 years, because obviously things don't change fast in like 3 years.
sure. So I don't think that, I think people have an addiction to screens and phones.
Okay.
Um, and I don't think that if you're able to interact entirely with an agent, does that mean that you're not going to be scrolling through your social network and looking at pictures? No, you're going to still be looking
No,
at pictures.
that's
You're still
true.
going to be want to watch videos.
That's true.
And I think, at least for maybe our generation, we're used to using screens and interacting on screens. I might see maybe a younger generation decide that they don't need those screens anymore, that they don't like them anymore. Just kind of, some people in my generation have kind of given up on televisions, in favor of like a more interactive experience, like a computer or phone. So I think that there still will be a use case for that. I think that, and also preferences change over time, where people are, some people are going to want more like skeuomorphic things, like, like seems more human, seems more like tangible,
Yeah,
versus like I feel like we're in a minimalistic design phase right now. And so I think that designers will still totally exist because they'll be able to help influence what the future of design looks like. I think that they will heavily leverage AI to do that.
oh
And you
yeah.
might not need front end engineers to do as much anymore.
I think that's a very solid take, and it's kind of what I think that too. Because yeah, UI will probably exist to some degree, because some apps you just want to see them, or sometimes maybe I'm in a room with somebody, or I'm on the bus and I can't really talk to the thing and I can't really hear the thing, so I want to
Totally.
see. Um, but definitely
Now,
front end
I do
engineers.
think that you will end up with some AI generated interfaces on the fly, or personalized interfaces where, if like, you are, if I've made a request, like you said, hey, order me a mattress, right?
Yeah,
It's going to, first of all, the AI agent might, it might know that you just want it to order the mattress, or it might know that that you want to give it, that you want to see three different suggestions and then choose between those, right? And so then in what it sends back to you, right now Power Prompts does like a lot of sending of emails, which I think is a great interface because everybody has an email pretty much.
yeah.
Well, most people, I guess. And so, that then you've got links in there that you can click and do something, right? That's, I think, a pretty handy interface for me. But other people, they might just want like a full-on app that's going to land in widgets that do a full explanation of each mattress, and then with like a buy
True,
now button, right? And so
true.
I think that you've got, maybe flexibility or personalization of interfaces where I can determine the type of interface that I like, which is what I do. Like, I run Linux a lot, and I like determining the interface that I like. And if something like MacBooks, they pop the notification up in the top right. I hate that. That's where my X button is. Like, I got stuff going on in the top right. Like, I don't want to have that happening up there.
Here,
And so having that personalization, I think, is something that AI will be able to handle and do well. And then it'll just be the back and forth of API, and your front end will be potentially largely determined by yourself.
I think that's a possibility, especially when you see even worlds in games being like, you've seen the Minecraft video where you look around. Of course, what actually happened there is very non-deterministic, and it's only visuals and not an actual physical world. So you probably wouldn't want exactly that in a game. But it doesn't mean you can't find a way to power games with AI or UIs with AI in a way that is actually a little bit more deterministic and actually more useful. I think there's a future in
Yeah.
that. I think as well.
Well, yeah. So with apps, I think many people are going to be running their own AI client. And so right now, you could integrate the way that you work with AI is through ChatGPT, or maybe some way somebody else interacts with AI is through Claude. That's their preferred client of choice. If you're using Cursor, you're using the IDE there. Maybe you use it on your phone, or maybe you just have a chat device. I imagine that Amazon Alexa will be putting out a much higher quality chat interface, right? And I think in a
Yeah,
couple of years you'll see a lot of these, chat interfaces. And so I think that everybody will kind of have their own interface, their own like starting point for getting to agents, and then a bunch of different agents will be able to automatically integrate with those. Where I'm looking for, like you've got like your Amazon agent that's going to buy something for you on Amazon. I have my client, which is going to interact with that, which is going to do the purchasing and send it back to me. Just like, but then if somebody else has a different client, like maybe an automated client like Pyro Prompts, or different automation tools, then that can automatically do that as well, right? And so I think you end up with something where I've been calling it the agentic web. I've seen the term thrown around a little bit, where everybody's got their own client and it all interacts with the same internet. Just like coming onto this call, I run Firefox. I didn't even have Chrome installed on this computer, and it required me to install Chrome. So that's like a different interface to the internet, right? On a phone, I got Safari on my iPhone. Everybody's got their own interface to the
that is
web,
true.
and it does impact how the web shows up, right? Like browser that you're showing, some of them render CSS in different ways, and so there will be standards of interacting with AI, and different clients will support different sets of those standards, and some of them will probably be ahead in different things that they support.
That's true. One other topic which I was really thinking about and I really want to touch on before we end is fine tuning, which you mentioned as, and we've talked earlier, kind of hinted to it as a kind of a not necessarily option of last resort, but definitely towards the end of resorts. Um, when do you think it's like like? Can you think of a use case where it is super useful? And I might have. Oh, I thought I lost my network. But can you think of a use case which is where it's really useful? And also, how do you actually do it? Like, what's the core concept and architecture behind it?
Sure. So I have run two different fine tuning sets, where I will take specific like inputs, outputs, and train a model on those. And I've trained Llama on those. I haven't trained OpenAI. The process is, as I understand, very similar, where I'm able to take, like, you've got the foundational model that has all this knowledge built in, but maybe you want it to have a very specific um, output tone that matches closer to your voice, have it know specific things. And so you can train that information into the model and then hope that the model's inference is going to pick it up. In terms of it knowing specific things, RAG is, from what I've seen, a much better process for that. Being able to put the information that it needs to know into the prompt
Yeah,
and allowing it to inference based on what's in the prompt is much more robust than training a model on it. Also, training a model can be expensive. It's going to take compute time, it's going to have lag time. And so, if, for example, you are bringing in sports scores and who won a certain, the Super Bowl, who won a sports game
yeah,
last night, even, right? You're not going to retrain your models daily for
every
that,
day. Yeah,
and
it
so
makes
you're going to get more bang for your buck out of doing RAG. And so that's the knowledge side. Then on the like style and tone side, if you want, so this early on was done for a lot of people who were trying to get proper JSON responses, and it wasn't great at doing like well formed JSON, right? Like,
okay. Yeah,
think like back in like the early GPT-4 days before they
yeah,
had structured outputs, which I think was introduced in August. Um, Claude had some guardrails, but even that wasn't perfect, where like you weren't specifying the types. Getting it to respond in a well-formed way that you could parse was a challenge. And so people were fine-tuning models to get it to respond in those exact formats. And that's just really not necessary anymore. And so now, like, if you're looking for a specific tone, you can still achieve a lot of that with putting in examples, two, three shot
Yeah, I understand that.
examples.
I
And
was
so, like,
gonna.
I
I,
think that you owe it to yourself to try all the prompt engineering techniques, especially OpenAI now has caching with their. And so, if you put everything up front that's static in your prompt, you've got the role, you've got your examples, you've got some context, which is going to be the same. Hopefully, maybe between requests, maybe it's not right. If you're doing stuff for different brands, then the context maybe changes there, and so you want to have that dynamic part lower down. But then you can save a lot of money by using that prompt caching. And I think you get a lot more bang for your buck out of doing the prompt engineering work instead of the fine tuning.
I was gonna say that to me, fine tuning feels like a fancier end shot, more
It
advanced
does
because
it all up
prompt.
front though, and then you don't have the ability to change it later, right? Like then you have to
Yeah,
retrain.
yeah. I guess it can make sense when the data set is really big, right?
If you have a large data set that embodies exactly what you want, that would be much more expensive to put into a prompt, and fine tuning could be a good solution there. Sure.
Okay, okay, fair, fair. What do you think? So,
Here's an example. Here's an example of where it could be really beneficial. If you have a new programming language, I think some of the coding influencers are doing advent of code, where they've
yeah,
got like emojis and stuff in the code, right? If you've got a whole new programming language, whole new set of text that you want it to be able to know and emulate that doesn't exist, fine tuning might be a really good solution for that.
okay. So
Uh,
we broke off for a minute, and we were just figuring things out. And while we were fixing it, we fixed it by turning it off and turning it on. And we were saying, well, this actually works for AI too when you turn it off and turn it on, and it loses dual context. And Matt, you were saying,
yeah. So sometimes when you have a long conversation going, it's going to start losing. It only has such a large context window, and so it will get confused if you have too long of a conversation going. And so I've seen this with some people when if they're using a conversation for um, content creation, writing
oh yeah,
posts and things, it will start getting confused. It'll start relating back to previous posts that were said. But if they start again with a new conversation, it will help them out. OpenAI probably does this best out of anything else in the picking
really?
of which things to include. It's the best I've seen in a long conversation. Versus, if you're trying to use like LangChain, there's different ways you can choose. You say, I want the most recent ones. I want the most recent ones with the first message. You can have different like RAG methods of including things where it's saving some different parts. OpenAI, I think, does a really good job of in the conversation determining what still needs to be in the context window and what doesn't.
I think that's fair because naturally, just by gut feeling, I've always liked talking to ChatGPT more than the other models. But for coding, I usually use Sonnet, like pretty much everybody else does.
Yeah, Sonnet 3.5 is really good, especially the new version that came out in like I think October.
I don't know. I don't remember. I haven't felt any big change, to be honest. But maybe. I don't know. One thing, a note which I would like to kind of end on is so
Sure.
there's a bunch of stuff. If somebody like a software engineer tries to get into AI, you have RAG and you have prompt engineering, which is what I think you should start with. It's what I kind of started with. And they're relatively easy to understand, relatively easy to also code small projects with.
Yeah.
But then you get into more complex stuff. Like we talked about evals, we talked about fine tuning, training your own models. Do you think what do you think should be the next step, if there should even be a next step for somebody that's just trying to do AI engineering, not necessarily actual MLAI research?
Next step, as in they've already done the prompt engineering, they feel good with that stuff, or if they're coming
They
in
feel good with
cold,
RAG, they
just
feel
trying to get
good. They feel
started.
good with RAG. They feel good with RAG, and they feel good with prompt engineering. Yeah.
If you're good with RAG and you're good with prompt engineering, I think that the biggest opportunity, the most defensible opportunity is agent development. And that really seems to be at least the big hot topic here in like, Q4 2024 is agentic development. And I think that that's going to be really big through 2025 at the very least. And I can there's two sides. You can either do the client side, like this is the interface that somebody's using to access AI. And so if you feel like you're really good at user interfaces, that's probably a great place to be. But then you're going to be competing against Claude and ChatGPT and some of these really big players as an interface versus Claude recently released their MCP spec, the Model Context Protocol, where now there's good ways for Claude Desktop to access remote data. That could be your remote data, right? That could be your remote set of actions and tools, and you could do the same thing. OpenAI has their custom GPTs, which is very, very similar, where it's accessing data through an open API spec. And so I think the most defensible is you run a business that's on its own, isolated, but it has agentic uh, interface, which can then connect into Claude or OpenAI or eventually any other interface, any other client, AI client. PyroPrompts has ways to hook into those via chat. And so if that's something that you're looking to get automation around, I think PyroPrompts might be a good solution for you.
Pyroprompts.com, guys, check it out.
PyroPrompts.com.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good take because I've seen around other people on Twitter that they all say, okay, 2024 was the year of RAG and 2025 is the year of agent. And it makes sense because you're trying to automate as much stuff as possible and effectively save time because this is the core use case for AI. The core thing we even care of it about is to save time. It's yeah, it's the core thing.
So I don't see it as just saving time. I see it as, so if you have something that you do every single week, let's say you're ordering new inventory for your business, sure, that
Yeah.
saves time, but it also makes sure that it's done, that it's actually, it
Consistently.
actually gets done. It doesn't require that discipline. You don't have to have that piece, that note to yourself, oh, every Friday I got to order inventory. AI is going to do that. It's always going to do it correctly, theoretically,
Yeah,
if you set it
hopefully.
up right. Yeah, hopefully. And so if you go through that, I always say, you need to automate to accelerate. And so if you want to take on more tasks, if you want to go faster and not just save more time, automation is the key to that. And I think it's never been easier to automate than it is right now with AI.
No, it's so true. And I'm starting a small section on my website, Letters to My Children, because I recently found out my fiance is pregnant. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And one of the articles is why I'm a tech optimist, and kind of because I'm trying to, figure out, okay, what would I like to instill into my children in case I'm not here anymore. And one of the arguments was precisely it kind of fits into the tagline of automate to accelerate. Like agriculture, we used to use however many hectares to produce 1 ton. Now we use a lot less hectares. We used to spend 40 hours to produce 1 ton. Now we spend like 5 or whatever it is, because I don't remember the actual number, so don't quote me on that.
Sure.
But that unlocks that automation and that efficientization of that process unlocked us to do other things and accelerate other things, which is why we eventually ended up today where we have cushy jobs from a nice chair on a nice laptop, and it's warm inside or
Yeah.
cold if it's
Yeah. So techno optimism is absolutely where I'm at. We need to accelerate through. And I think there's a movement where people are saying, I don't want to get too political for your podcast, but people want to decrease populations. I think the
yeah,
only way that we survive is we continue pushing through. You don't try to create this large Ponzi scheme of wealth or anything like that. You need to keep reproducing, growing the population. We need to consider how we get to 40 billion people,
yeah,
400 billion, a trillion people eventually. That's where we're eventually going, and that's where we should be trying to go to. And the reason that our population has gotten as large as it is on Earth is because we can support it.
exactly.
There's Poverty has never been lower. I know it doesn't feel like that some days. Um,
True.
People, hunger has never been lower. I know it doesn't feel like that some days. But if you look back to where Read a history book. Go back to the 1400s, like the Dark Ages.
Oh yeah.
Very different place, man. Coming out of the
Even
Dark Ages then was very
even
different
sa-
place.
even safety, as unsafe as some cities like London are, overall the world is a much safer place than it was a few hundred years ago. It just is. There's no
Absolutely.
way to combat that. And kind of
It's healthier. Like life expectations are higher.
yeah.
Newborn children tend to live long. Like it's good things are happening, and we need to keep pushing that
True.
boundary.
Normal people, poor people have more of a say in how things happen than they used to 300 years ago. I mean, it's things are improving, and this is kind of the point I made in the that letter to my children of saying, it's okay. People over there argue that the pie should be split equally because that's what's fair, and people over here are arguing that the pie should be split meritocratically because that's what's fair. And then different people have different versions of what meritocratic means. I'm not here to argue how to split the pie. I'm here to make the pie bigger.
Yes, let's make a bigger pie, man. That's what it's all about. It's we talk about energy generation, right? You can put solar panels on top of every house, and now every house is like independent from the grid, doesn't rely on a centralized source. That creates more energy to do everything else with.
Yeah.
You can do more food production, right? If everybody's generating food, then there's more food production. It's also more decentralized and more robust to something happening and supply chain issues. And so, yeah, I'm a big advocate of let's do
Me,
more. And I think AI and automation can help us do more.
I think so too. And even for like, I used to work in climate tech a few years ago, and some climate, not all, like there are people who are for technological acceleration as well in climate. But there are some people who are for deceleration because they got it in their minds that we're going to increase CO2 emissions and all these other things, and we're going to destroy the environment. And there is a point to that, true. But as technology evolves, we are going to figure out ways to fix these things and improve these things and, still keep on growing while dealing with the current problems.
Absolutely.
I'm entirely betting on let's grow the pie, let's advance technology. And I think my kids should do that too.
Yeah. Maintaining a safe and healthy environment is a good ecosystem of Earth is very important for future generations, but we got to make sure that there are future generations there to enjoy it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. 100%. Let's end it on that note of positive techno optimism.
Love it, man.
Do you have
Great.
anything to like? Obviously, pyroprompts.com. We've said that already.
Powerprompts.com, if you're looking to automate things with AI, if you're find yourself running the same prompts all the time, um, Pyroprompts offers ways for you to automatically run prompts, chain them together with multiple prompts using different models, and incorporate RAG through Perplexity, RSS feeds, data sets, and more. Pyroprompts.com absolutely help you out. No subscription required. We've got free credits we give out all the time. So come and check it out, try it out. I think automation, might not be the 2025 thing that agentic will be, but automation's coming where you're going to have AI agents running all on their own without any interaction from you, just like a coach would do something and send you things on a weekly, daily basis, whatever. Check it out, pyroprompts.com. The I also do contracting, and so if you're looking to build your own agents, you can build your own AI applications. I help out a lot with that. Sure, AI coders like Cursor can do a tremendous amount. If you're looking for an engineer who's been around the block, I've got 15 plus years experience in programming. And I can absolutely help out with that as well.
Hey guys, if you're looking for like a contractor, you could get us both.
Here we go. Yeah, we can partner together on something that'd be fun.
You got a 2-man team already. I mean,
Here we go.
thanks for coming on the show, man.
Alex, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Awesome stuff.